Okay, so welcome to my Master of the Skies weather briefing show here on YouTube. I thought I'd pop in and do a show for you today. Looking at this time the satellite imagery. Here we're looking at the global infrared satellite imagery here on windy.com. And the idea here was to show you a little bit about some of these mid-latitude frontal features. For those of you who have purchased some of my weather forecasting material, whether it be the ebook or the weather forecasting training course, you remember that I talked about what we call the polar front that separates essentially tropical air over the equatorward side and polar air on the poleward side of the front. And so actually you can see the polar front right here. And what tends to happen is when you have perturbations that actually link up with the polar front, you can start to develop low pressure systems, as you can see here, and then you'll have the attendant cold fronts, warm fronts, occluded fronts, and you can actually see them quite nicely here on the satellite imagery. And so if you remember when I talked about polar fronts in my weather course, so you can get what we call a polar front wave train, which is actually a succession of low pressure systems along the polar front, especially in zonal westerly flow, that actually affect these weather systems from west to east across the mid-latitudes. And so if we go back to the satellite imagery and take a look, you can actually pick out these fronts. Here you can see, for example, if we concentrate first over the Atlantic, you can actually see a cold front here over the western Atlantic with a low pressure system with the occluded front, then the warm front, stationary front, cold front, and you can actually see how these low pressure systems are linked up along the polar front wave train. You can actually follow them all around the hemisphere. You can see the cold front here, low pressure, and if you keep on going towards the east, you can sort of pick out the following wave along the polar front with these low pressure systems, and you can actually just keep going over towards Asia, China, and you can just follow this whole wave train across the entire hemisphere into the Pacific here, over the Aleutians, over the Pacific Northwest, over the U.S., North America here, and the U.S. here, and another front, and we're back to our cold front that we started with when we started the analysis. So it's quite interesting to do that, and you can actually, if I zoom in, you can actually pick out the temperatures, and you could basically see that when you're south of the front, it's much warmer, and then when you're north of the front, you're basically getting much cooler temperatures here. And so that's what this polar front is actually doing. It's separating the warm air, tropical air to the south, and the cooler polar air to the north. And you can actually see that also as you go across the hemisphere. North of the front, cooler air; south of the polar front, warmer air, etc., etc. And what you can actually do also is you can actually superimpose the surface pressure field looking at the isobars, and that'll help you pinpoint where the centers of the lows and center of the highs are. So you can see sort of this low pressure system here, this deep low pressure system off the Icelandic coast, linked also to the semi-permanent polar low. And then the other low pressure systems associated with the wave train as we go across the hemisphere that we just took a look at here. Now, what's also interesting here, you can also pick out the subtropical high pressure systems. For example, the Bermuda Azores high here over the subtropical Atlantic, or the Pacific high here over the subtropical Pacific. And you can also pick out the polar low, the Icelandic low, and also the Aleutian low over the Aleutians near Alaska. And you can do the same thing for the southern hemisphere. Of course, right now in the southern hemisphere, it's southern hemisphere winter, and so it's more active in terms of the storm front and in terms of the polar front. You can see a whole bunch of these low pressure systems associated with the wave train also in the southern hemisphere. Of course, as you know, in the southern hemisphere, low pressure systems spin in the opposite direction that they do in the northern hemisphere. So for those of you who are not accustomed to taking a look at weather in the southern hemisphere, it may be a little bit more tricky for the northern hemisphere folks. But you also pick out the subtropical highs over the South Atlantic, also over the southern Pacific. And so you have the same features, basically just a more active storm track since we are winter down in the southern hemisphere. So there you go. So that's about it. I hope you enjoyed this short analysis of the polar front and the polar front wave train. If you're interested in weather, don't hesitate to go check out some of my products under this video and on my YouTube channel. If you're interested either in weather forecasting or just weather in general, I have an ebook, a weather forecasting course. Certainly check them out. And in the meantime, I wish you a nice morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're located. And I'll catch you again soon.